To extract such vast quantities of energy from such an unconventional fuel, the nuclear states have built an industrial complex that spans the globe. This fuel chain begins with uranium mining. In a conventional mine, uranium-bearing rock is dug up from open-cut pits or underground tunnels. It's trucked to uranium mills where it is crushed to a fine powder and chemically treated to separate the traces of uranium. To produce 1 ton of uranium oxide, or yellow cake, around 660 tons of rock is crushed and discarded. To fuel a conventional nuclear power station for 1 year, 200 tons of uranium are needed, leaving behind 130,000 tons of waste. This radioactive waste rock, or tailings, is dumped next to the mine in huge dams. It contains a cocktail of radioactive decay products and needs to be isolated from the environment for tens of thousands of years. Uranium mining is highly water intensive. The Olympic Dam mine in South Australia consumes 33,000 tons of water a day, making it one of the largest water users in the country. The uranium is then transported to enrichment plants, where it's converted into a gas and purified further. The 200 tons of uranium oxide yields 24 tons of low-enriched uranium suitable for nuclear fuel. Enriching the uranium further yields weapons-grade material, making enrichment plants a key technology for nuclear weapons proliferation. One waste product from the enrichment process is so-called depleted uranium, or DU.
Copy 6 miles, let me know when you see the target area and I'll start the talk on. We see it, start talking. We're there, start talking.
Hundreds of tons of DU have been machined into ammunition and fired into Kuwait, Bosnia, Iraq and Afghanistan. Radioactive dust from these munitions has already caused sharp rises in cancer and other illnesses amongst military forces and civilians alike. The enriched uranium is transported to fuel fabrication plants and carefully manufactured into nuclear fuel assemblies. These are loaded into the nuclear power station, where the intense heat of the nuclear reactions in the fuel is used to produce steam, driving conventional turbines to generate electricity. The extreme heat, pressure and radiation fields in a nuclear reactor demand precision engineering and constant vigilance by plant operators. After more than a year in the reactor core, the fuel becomes too contaminated to sustain a chain reaction. The irradiated fuel assemblies are set aside in pools for several years until they are cool enough to be transferred to sealed sheds next door to the reactors. Spent nuclear fuel is so intensely radioactive that all handling must be done by remote control. It needs to be isolated from people and the environment for hundreds of thousands of years. As yet, it is not clear whether it will be possible to achieve this. One proposal is to encase the fuel in lead, steel and copper canisters before burying them in stable geological formations deep underground and backfilling the tunnels with remote piloted vehicles. But in time, the waste will escape even this containment After 60 years, there's still no foreseeable solution to the nuclear waste problem. A small number of countries operate reprocessing plants to extract the exotic element plutonium, which forms in the spent fuel. In theory, this is done to provide fuel for a new generation of plutonium breeder reactors, which create or breed more plutonium than they burn up. In practice, after several accidents and more than $100 billion in funding, no one has ever been able to build a commercially successful plutonium reactor. For this reason, there are now more than 270 tons of separated plutonium sitting in civilian stockpiles around the world. It takes as little as 4 kilograms of this material to make a bomb capable of destroying a city. For a major nuclear expansion will radically increase the amount of nuclear materials in circulation. At the same time, the system of international safeguards intended to restrict the availability of nuclear weapons is breaking down. In the past decade, the International Atomic Energy Agency reported more than 650 cases of smuggling involving nuclear and radioactive materials. Until the existing nuclear weapon states finally dismantle their Cold War stockpiles, every ton of uranium mined adds to the risk that one day these weapons will be used again. When power stations and reprocessing plants are no longer safe to operate, they are shut down and left to cool for several decades. Eventually, they will have to be carefully dismantled and buried. In the UK alone, the clean-up bill for a number of civil and military nuclear facilities is estimated at more than £90 billion. Every stage of the nuclear fuel chain produces radioactive materials. Radiation affects our bodies in different ways, depending on the kind of radiation and whether the dose is internal or external. It is possible to shield against external sources of low-energy alpha or beta radiation. But if inhaled as dust or swallowed with food, these radiation-emitting particles can lodge in our lungs and other organs. Once embedded in our bodies, radioactive chemicals bombard nearby cells at close range with enough energy to rupture cells and damage DNA.